Okay. Hi, everybody. This is Kubernetes SIG architecture, or no, it's a work group device management for April 29th. And I will bring up the agenda here. Have it somewhere. Okay. Um, so I guess first thing I'll say is congratulations, 133 went out the door. We got a lot of functionality in there. Um, and so now we just, move on to the next thing. So our success is rewarded with more work, and let's keep doing it. Um, I have an item on here to start looking at the plan. I know there's already a lot of work going on, and I owe lots of reviews. But anyway, with that said, let's jump into the agenda. Laura, you're up,
Can I get screen share?
of course.
Thanks.
Okay, you should work now.
Got it. I'm taking over. Okay. Hi, everybody. I want to talk about the general reliability project related to like kubelet and all of the components between like kubelet, the DRA drivers, and everything intermediary. This is a project that has been talked about a couple other times. There's a link to a doc that I started like a while ago. I took a little break. I'm back. So I'm going to kind of like go through what these things are and then just make sure that we're all on the same page, and then also see if anybody wants to help work on any of the stuff. So overall, what I'm trying to do is that there's GA incoming, assumedly, and there were some questions raised about the reliability, as in like what can really be expected between like kubelet and the DRA drivers in terms of like if the plugin or the drivers crash, then what's the expectation of kubelet to be like, oh, this thing's never coming back. I should like, not try so hard, or I should unprepare some resources that maybe didn't get cleaned up, like those types of things. And there's a category of things that might just be working as intended, but needs to be better documented. There's a category of things that's like kubelet or the example driver maybe needs to show, maybe needs to be changed so that it can handle those situations, or like in the case of the example driver, that it's more clear for driver authors to actually achieve whatever our like best practice is. We did talk about this again like a month and a half ago or something. These were the principles that we kind of came up with of what we thought was important in this like grander scheme of reliability. In general, it's that recoverability of the DRA plugin is the first line of defense, but there is a number of transient failures that are, or permanent failures that we may be able to detect. And that stuff we want to be able to do without having to ask the user to do some complicated like troubleshooting hijinks to like thread all the pieces back together. So that's kind of like the super generic thing about that. So I've been operating on sort of this list of questions that Sergey had published a while ago, while also cross-referencing it with this view in the board. So this is the normal dynamic resource allocation board, but there's a reliability tab where I picked stuff that I think is relevant to this effort and added the reliability area on it so that I can see it here. So cross-reference with some of these things of stuff that's already ongoing in flight, or I think is at least partially related. And then I don't know how much I've like affected the normal order of things, but I did reorder at least a few of these in terms of like what I thought was most important. So probably that has had some effect on the existing board. So sorry in advance of that. Tell me if I shouldn't be doing that, but it did help kind of organize what I think is going on here. And then I would love to take an opportunity either now or like later in the meeting to kind of like walk through some of these things and make sure that like the such order is correct. But I think what I want to really highlight right now is that there's a number of things that are already in progress or in review. Some of them like have some tests failing, some of them are just waiting for a review. So I think this category of stuff is like for me personally is a priority for like review and like pinging about, I guess, to like make sure that they're okay or like what they need next. But then after that, kind of this list of things in ready is what I think is most important. Some of these I made as like draft issues to kind of like talk about now. One of which is this overarching question, which I would like to talk about. But in general, it includes this issue about supporting permanent and transient errors, scale testing for GA of structure parameters. Um, being able to articulate exactly the kubelet reconnection time on kubelet restart or if the plugin crashes. So we can either confirm that that's like a good enough number or at least like publish some docs about that. And then these two are really kind of important. I need some brain space related. So I'm just going to ask this and then ask for some discussion time on either that or this project. There is an issue here about support permanent and transient errors that is implying that if the DRA plugin can report, I'm having this type of error, we could make some intelligent decision about like, yes, that's something we can recover from, or no, that's not. But for things that maybe are in a middle space of that, or if the plugin just straight up like doesn't respond and we don't know why, like we are not at the point where it's giving us like a runtime error, but it just like crashed, we need to make a decision about how long that has to happen before we think that we shouldn't like keep trying to reconnect or like if we should do any bigger cleanup stuff. And if we do decide that that's a thing that we should do, that there's some possible amount of time that we don't want to wait any longer, then how much longer do we need to wait before something like kubelet cleans up any resources that were left over that weren't cleaned up by a graceful shutdown of either the plugin or the driver? So I think this is a fundamental question this group and Signode kind of needs to come to terms with so that we can unblock what we're actually going to do about that, whether again, that's a docs question, whether that's we're going to make kubelet, you know, keep track of how long it's waited to find this plugin and decide to like go down some other recovery path if it's been long enough. So I'm going to take a pause there. I talked about both the project and this, which is my most pressing question. So any comments on either of those would be great.
I think right now, Patrick, we didn't we in the seamless upgrade one, we basically
did,
said if it's, yeah.
Okay, what's the decision?
The seamless upgrade PR changed it so that the kubelet waits, I think, for 60 seconds, 1 minute, after it detects that the plugin is gone, and then it cleans up resource slices.
I thought it was 30 seconds, but I don't, maybe we ended up with 60.
Yeah, we would need to look up the PR.
30 to 60 seconds for the plugin to become available. If not, it immediately cleans up.
But that's if it's, so when you say it detects that it's not there, so if it, when you say that, you mean like gRPC calls are failing? What is not there mean?
Unregistered.
Unregistered.
So if
Okay.
if a plugin is still registered and just fails, it doesn't clean up resources.
Okay. It's only if it's unregistered.
Yeah.
So if you go in and you like hard kill a process, the driver process, the socket's still there, kubelet thinks it's still registered. There's no watchdog that's going to say this process is gone.
There will be. That's the pending PR from Ed. So detecting that a plugin is gone is surprisingly hard with gRPC, but Ed has this PR pending. This is the implementation PR from Ed about using a native mechanism in gRPC to ping basically the connection and see whether it is down. And that should cover the scenario where the socket still exists and no one is responding and it can't be connected to.
And so
Yeah.
are we, and so in this case, then are we after a certain amount of time, we're gonna decide it's gone and we're gonna automatically unregister it?
Yes.
Is that the idea?
Yeah, and I think
And
that's the
then,
inner.
and then there'll be, sorry, then there'll be
No,
the
go ahead.
30-second
Yes.
wait from the unregistration time. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so today, if it's actually unregistered, then there is a agreed upon timeout of something like 30 to 60 seconds, and then cleanup happens. If it's not unregistered, this thing or something like it, but this thing will notice the stale socket and unregister it. Right now, there's some time delay to that, perhaps, and then this will improve that because we have better health monitoring, and then that same mechanism from before will notice that it's unregistered after that timeout and or remove the resources. Okay. So sounds like the answer is 30 to 60 seconds.
It's 30 to 60 second, the cleanup is 30 to 60 seconds after the unregistration. The unregistration is some
It's still
question mark
in flight. Yeah.
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 Detecting that.
And I'm not sure. Hold on, sorry. I did put some notes in here. Only does it for DRA plugins. If the server connection was closed, lifecycle wise happens when a client closes connections with the gRPC server, in this case, the DRA plugin. Sorry, these were like notes of myself of trying to figure out what's going on here. Okay, well, I think it probably sounds relevant to this effort to definitely document that stuff and surface if EDS is the solution that we go forward with, to surface what the like actual kind of like timeline effect is, I guess, because I think this question comes a lot in terms of like basically seconds. We know that more clearly with the other timeout. With this one, this is part of some like life cycle of this gRPC connection. So I think some basically digging so that we can turn that into something meaningful in a documentation state of when people can expect that to occur. Sergey, I just saw that you had a hand. What's up?
So yeah, I wanted to comment on this detection that plugin is unhealthy, what that Ed is doing in his PR, and what our reaction on that will be. So first, after Ed's PR, Kubelet will know that Kubelet, like the DRA doesn't reply any longer, so it will mark it like unregistered. But we also discussed in this PR, I think one of the comments was that even with this PR, we still need to have liveness probe on a DRA plugin, and this liveness probe needs to restart the DRA. So like if Kubelet can detect that something wrong, but like we need to have some remediation, and remediation will likely be the liveness probe. And I don't know how to track the writing down this best practice to implement liveness probe, and whether it should be like gRPC liveness probe or it should be like some HTTP or like whatever. Like we need to write it down and understand what the recommendation will be.
We can have some recommendations, but ultimately that is entirely up to the DRA driver office how they deploy their container. I don't think we shouldn't implement anything specific to DRA, like a DRA liveness probe. I would expect that whatever we already have in Kubernetes for liveness probes of a container can also be used here. Ultimately it's just a daemon set. We need to determine if the daemon set is healthy, and that is a standard problem.
Yeah, I understand, but implementing best practice and showing how it can be implemented, I think it needs to be at least in our example plugin and documentation, and at the maximum, like specific implementation can be recommended.
I agree. This can be documentation, example driver level functionality, but I don't think we need any Kubernetes enhancements for this.
Right. Yeah,
we do need a kubelet enhancements for the monitor plugin connection thing, but not for the liveness probe.
Yes, but my question is, how do we track the updating documentation to make sure that the liveness probe is documented and ideally implemented in example driver?
Yeah, I did just add something in here to this board, and I think all of these things that I have as drafts right now, if like there isn't like in this meeting right now, if there's no like major decision of like, no, we definitely shouldn't do that or whatever, I'll turn it into a real issue. If this one, particularly to your question, Sergey, is about and trying to synthesize what Patrick is saying too, that what we need is to have an example in the example DRA driver and or documentation about how a driver author would implement a liveness probe and make some comments about what that liveness probe may look like, or even if we can come to some agreement of what it should look like, we could make some comments in the documentation there. Is that
And
correct? Okay.
what will be default timeout? Like, so timeouts across like liveness probes and Kuba doesn't conflict that much. I bet it's all easy and simple. I just want to make sure that we
It's
document
tracked.
it.
I get it.
Yeah, let's just make
and
sure
second-
it's in the, okay. Go ahead, Sergey.
Yeah, and second thing is I like biggest reliability concerns I hear so far is on unregistration. So all sorts of like DRA went unhealthy, or like I registered the wrong DRA and then I registered the right DRA, and now I cannot remove my pods. Like I think we need to have a discussion on what to do with pods cleanup and how to recover from bad DRA driver was installed and now I cannot clean up my pods. Maybe we can have some, I don't know, maybe we should have this discussion and like understand what's the generic solution. And one alternative I thought of is device plugin, for instance, doesn't need much of cleanup. So maybe we can get away with DRA drivers that can tell that I don't need a cleanup. So some DRA drivers will be a little bit safer on disappearing or like node up unallocation. That's
So
just an
you're
idea.
saying like
But,
we could add some sort of metadata the driver publishes, or a call or something where the queue or at registration time that says, hey, you're welcome to just, if I'm gone, just go ahead and delete the pod. It's safe. Is that what you're thinking?
yeah, something like that. Yeah, that may be an option. Or maybe per device or per connection. Yeah.
Or per node prepare resource call. So if we prepare this device, you don't need to call node unprepare resources.
Yeah, that may be an option, because I mean that may make situation a little bit better. I think so far unrecoverability of that case when not unprepared resources cannot be called and customers don't know how to recover this DRA driver. Or like another case I heard somebody implemented DRA driver and I mean given it was a development, but device were named differently and then they started being named other way, and you cannot unprepare resources any longer because DRA driver has no idea how to unprepare this resource. It doesn't know what device it is. So that was another problem. But it's clearly unrecoverable error, and maybe we need to have kubelet kubectl delete pod ---- force. I will say like, oh, I will delete this pod without like even unpreparing resources or something.
Right, even with the risk of orphaning things, which
Yeah.
is really the risk here. Yeah.
Well, you can't really force that through kubectl because it is a node local operation. You can force delete the pod, and then the node will still believe that it needs to do something for the containers, and it will not tear them down, even though they are removed. So a bit pessimistic that we can do that through kubectl and tell the node that it's okay to tear that down. We would need a new pod field for that, something like really delete this pod here, and without actually deleting it.
Don't we have the same problem we talked about for volumes or something? Isn't
Volumes have exactly the same problem, and that's an unsolved problem for volumes. You get the same effect with volumes that are attached, and you uninstall the CSI driver, and the CSI control plane component cannot tell whether it's safe to detach a volume without the node component. So this is not a new problem. It has existed for volumes forever, basically.
Does this also relate back to So I was just gonna say, does this also relate back to the issue we've talked about with having transient versus permanent failures come back from the node prepare resource and node prepare unresources calls? Because at least in the case Sergey described a minute ago, if the name of the device had changed, if the node unprepared resource call returns a permanent failure saying there's no way I'm ever going to be able to unprepare this thing, I don't even know what this is, then in
If
theory
it-
the pod could mark that as okay, this has permanently failed, but that's okay now to go ahead and delete
Yeah.
the pod.
It doesn't even need to return an error. It can just say, okay, I'm done.
It's unprepared because I don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's gone. I'm fine.
Yeah,
Whatever you wanted
I
me to
agree,
do.
but that's a little, as a driver
Yeah.
implementer, that
Yeah.
feels weird to me. I want to return some kind of error, but mark it as permanent.
Yeah, that might be cleaner. Depends. Depends on how we
Okay,
define
so-
it. Yeah.
So I think that the answer is we need an issue to capture all of this, whether it's this one or a related one that basically.
Right, and
And let's just capture all these thoughts. Like we have a mitigation or a reduction in surface of frequency by doing something around, yeah, this doesn't have to be unprepared. And then in the cases that they do have to be unprepared, we're in the same situation volumes are, so we probably need to solve that more for volume. I don't see why we wouldn't solve that for volumes as well if we're gonna need to add some sort of pod field or something.
The problem with doing all of this for the different plugin types is that we need to touch a lot more code, and our community needs to adapt to it because it's not automatic. We would need to reach out to all CSI driver authors, and I think that should go through SIG-Node, not through us. SIG storage, sorry. We've had that problem with the other plugin things that we were doing. We were trying to solicit feedback from SIG storage on CSI drivers, for example. It has been really slow. I prefer doing something for DRA plugins over trying to boil the ocean and fixing it for everyone at the same time. If we come up with a good solution.
Well, you may be right. What I'm trying to say is that if we believe that in most cases unprepare is not needed, then and maybe if I look to our driver authors to tell me whether that's true or not. If an unprepared is generally is basically a no-op because just deleting the container or whatever is sufficient, then we probably have solved most of the problem with the DRA specific thing. And then we can take 2 years to go through some grand kept that solves the problem that's been there for 10 years, right? Like that's kind of my thinking.
Yeah. So we can definitely do it for DRA first, but then it would also need to be mirrored in the other APIs for volumes, because that's a different API. It's a different gRPC interface.
Sure, but I'm saying if it's like a forced delete thing and we have to do it to be able to plummet from API server down to Node and let Node delete the thing even though it doesn't know.
Yes.
I don't want 4 fields, one for volumes, one for, I mean, you could, but that seems kind of silly, right?
I just don't think that we need this solution.
Yeah,
I
fair
think
enough.
Between skip node unprepared resources and permanent failures, I think we are good enough for DRA without
Covered
a
most
forced
cases.
overboard. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I tend to agree that if you implement skip, then it should be. I mean, we shouldn't hear about this problem too often. It should be less of a surface. But right now,
You
like
can always
every
delete the node. Sorry. Okay, why don't we, are there any other, we've spent a lot of time on this one
yeah,
topic.
I want to, let's move on. My last thing is I'm going to implement in these notes. If anybody else wants to work on any of these things, please contact me, and then I will keep this up to date and probably open some Slack threads on stuff that I still have questions about. And thanks.
Okay,
Next.
thank you, Laura.
Yeah, next on the agenda, I added something below your bullet point because it's kind of related. Morten and I, we were discussing scheduling performance, and worst case scenarios. And I think we had identified some odd cases that shouldn't occur in practice, but that can lead to really long scheduling time, because the allocation in certain conditions can take over 30 seconds. I think that was one case that Morten identified in a unit test. The problem is, the question now is, how do we protect the scheduler against such cases? We could do basically a whack-a-mole game and try to identify all corner cases, handle them one by one. But I think that's not realistic. I think what we need instead is a general solution first. And that could be that we just say, here's a timeout. If allocation doesn't succeed within a certain amount of time, we give up. And that affects then pods, only those pods, or primarily the pods that really have some complex requirements or something that is completely unexpected. And that, I think, is something that we could do for GA as part of core DRA. But I would look for feedback from SIG scheduling folks how that should work in the scheduler, because it's ultimately a problem that all code running in the scheduler has. How long is a filter operation allowed to take?
Yeah, this is okay. Yeah, let's definitely bring this to SIG scheduling ASAP. I think that makes a lot of sense. Like when we have a single threaded, effectively,
It's not
pathway.
single threaded, but even if one thread is blocked for one node by 30 seconds, it delays the overall result of node filtering by that amount.
I mean, the overall, right, one pod at a time. We don't in parallel schedule two pods, right? It's serialized. And so you're gonna mess with everybody if you take too long.
I think it makes sense to handle that. The timeline, give a budget essentially.
Yeah.
That's one thing. I think there's other things for improving it that we get into in this issue, or this PR, but probably should move into an issue. I think that's where we need to figure out how this translates into the scalability requirements, performance envelope, or scalability envelopes. We can determine what is reasonable scenarios that we think are something that should be supported, and we can say other things are just outside the scalability envelope, and we get to it later.
Right. Okay.
For the sake, that's my second bullet point underneath the reliability thingy. I think these alternative allocation algorithms that we discussed in this issue, I see that as more experimental and probably something that we should put under a feature gate. Because
I agree.
It would be experimental initially, and that would be bad if we want to promote to GA. And we should test what we have almost right now with those scalability experiments. And if that pans out, I think we are good enough for GA, with that caveat that we need the timeout, because we can't rely on users to not do something really stupid or potentially even malicious.
Right. Right. Especially the malicious, because you actually can, it's an access point to denial of service. So
yeah. Okay, sounds like we kind of have an agreement, and I think we have an AR action item for Morten or myself, I don't know, to talk with SIG scheduling if we don't have them on the call, but it's something we should ask about. Probably.
One further little refinement there is, if somebody was trying to use it for denial of service, like how frequently will we penalize if there's a pod that gets timed out? Do we put it in, okay, we're not going to even look at you again until you change, right? Or do we, like, what kind of penalty do we put on it?
I think there will be exponential back off, because it's an unexpected failure at that point, and there is a back off with exponential timeouts for such failing pods.
Oh, there is already. Okay, awesome.
Yeah. And I think what we want to do is we want the pod to fall into that bucket.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, Gita.
Yes. So today we want to talk about match expression. We talked about it last time as well. We filed the issue. If anyone's interested, you have use case that needs this, please ping us. I also get to introduce a new contributor today, Ruhi. She's on the call today. She'll be helping with implementation and KEP for this. So welcome, Ruhi, to the work group and the Kubernetes community. The last thing I wanted to ask is timeline for this KEP and implementation. If we could get some guidance on that, we can plan accordingly.
So I don't think the release team has published but it's usually like week 7.
Late May, I think we talked about probably the cap.
The thing is, we don't have an opening of the cap phase. We can basically do caps at any time, but we feel we have attention from reviewers. We don't need to wait for anything.
Oh,
We could do
definitely.
caps right now.
Yeah, we are doing caps right now.
Yeah, we do.
So I think the question was what the deadlines are. Like,
Okay,
the sooner the
okay.
better is the answer.
Yes.
The deadline's likely to be late May-ish, or probably no, probably further than that. Probably June sometime. Okay, you've got a guess
I
here,
put in
Laura?
my,
Okay.
yeah, this is my guess based
Yeah,
on,
closer to late June. That sounds right to me. Because I think it's like usually like week 7-ish or 6-ish. And they usually take a week or so before they put the plan together. Like all this is sort of figure outable. You just have to go look at the previous year basically and kind of eyeball it. But this one should be relatively straightforward because you're putting something, you're adding one field as far as I know to. That's always the kiss of death, right? It's going to be straightforward, but like you're adding one field on a constraints struct we already have. You'll have a feature gate for it, and I think the cap should be pretty straightforward. So the sooner you can get it done, the better.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Laura, since you're displaying, you want to go back to the agenda? CC.
Yep, excuse me. Sorry, I was coughing badly. Thank you. So I want to bring this topic to this meeting regarding with usability improvement, which has been raised for some time. And previously, we have someone like Cordella willing to take up some, and unfortunately, she was not able to continue the work. So I'd love to bring this topic here and just to understand better in terms of the urgency and the timeline-wise. I think none of this should be a blocker for the following GA on the main features and APIs, but just would like to understand the urgency and the timeline-wise. And also, I put the variables as a separate line because the magic expression was raised earlier by Jita, and I think it's related with each other, and they should support each other if in future we plan to do both of the features. So yeah, that's it. And for the cell usability improvement, which previously were raised, I think it's focused mainly on the following areas. First, we want to maybe maybe squeeze in some validations into Cell so it can caught the errors like ahead of time. And Cell already has a lot of like validators kind of in, so I think it should be possible for us to have our own defined validator for certain like the validation rules constraints. And the second area is the error reporting. I think we have like the events reporting in the scheduling side, and also we have like status API like in port side, I think, to catch the device healthy related stuff. Just to understanding like what else we would be needed in this area. And also, yeah.
Go ahead. No, go ahead and finish. Yeah, sorry, I thought you were done.
Oh, I just try to provide some information for each of these. And for the tooling, to validate the cell expression, basically it's related with, shift left validation. I think Tristan from CellGo community is willing to take this up, and they are actually working on having more support for the test framework. So that's great. And the last one is the variables, which I just created an issue against. So if nobody gets data, we can start working on it like anytime. Yeah, that's basically the
Okay.
summary.
So if you can go back, Laura, to the other one, yeah. So I would say, like, and maybe I'd be curious to hear other people's opinions. Like, I think this is a nice thing to have. I don't think there's any urgency for it at this point. I think that people are still trying to understand how to do this. I think there are some questions like as we conceived it there, like those variables that are only usable in that one expression, like maybe that's fine, but could there be a way to define, like if I'm if I define a device class, I don't know, it might be nice. The idea is try to limit the knowledge that end users have to have. But so I have this thought of, oh, could the device class, who's a cluster administrator and a more sophisticated user, presumably, could define variables that then the end user could use. The problem is, though, they'd have to know about them. So they still have to know stuff. So I don't know how useful it is. So, but I think we can explore some thoughts like that and debate them. But I think this is useful. But as far as I know, it's not like right now we have, if we look at some of the expressions we're going to need for some of the stuff we're doing for TPUs, are they going to get super complicated where this would be really useful?
I don't think so. Patrick, when we talked about performance, you mentioned like analysis of cell potentially. Is this sort of in a similar direction?
We recently bumped the cells to pick up a lot of like performance improvements they have. So I think like they keep working on the performance wise. And for the variables specifically, we used it in some other features before. So the main reason we introduce is first to reduce the duplication while people have to writing the cell expressions. And secondly, is also for performance improvement. So it can have like a lazy evaluation and things like that. So it can like run faster. Yeah.
Well, the lazy evaluation piece is one we're talking about on the mix-ins, right? So I think we were saying, could we lazy evaluate, because we're talking about navigating the whole mix-in tree. I was reading the discussion you and Patrick were having. Like, if a variable is never referenced, it would be better to not have to flatten ahead of time, right? So typically you're not going to reference tons of variables in your expressions. You're just going to reference a couple. So
yeah, there's two levels here. One is the abstract cost estimation of a cell expression, which is just counting things, and we are roughly trying to make the work item equally large so that the operations that we are counting in cell roughly have the same runtime. But in reality, some expressions, some lookup methods are faster than others. And our attribute lookup is one of those cases where we can do some micro optimization that may have an effect, primarily probably because we are saving memory allocations, which tend to have an effect on overall process performance because of garbage collection. So that falls into that bucket. It doesn't change our API. It doesn't change how cell costs are estimated, but it would make it a bit faster in practice. So it's an optimization.
the lazy evaluation is an optimization?
No,
or?
the lookup. If we currently we actually create maps that then are passed to the cell runtime. And those get created and torn down frequently, which leaves a lot of garbage, memory garbage behind. We can avoid that by just referencing the existing data structures and having our own implementation for the lookup.
I see. Instead of flattening it to a map. The CC, with the variable implementation you've done in other places in the project, how does it work? Does it when it sees the list of variables, does it pre-calculate each variable and then if it's used like 5 times in the expression, it doesn't have to be calculated each time, or is it just like syntactically substituted?
Yeah, it's like if say this variable is a variable itself is like basically a cell expression. So when this variable like being used like say multiple times, 5 times, they only being like calculated once, and then yeah.
Okay. Kevin, do you in the expressions people are using or you expect people will be using for GPUs? What do you think? Is this? It makes it more readable for sure, I think, in a lot of cases. But how often do you think you'd use something like this?
It depends on the use case, right? So it definitely
I'm
helps.
sorry, I was asking Kevin because for the GPUs, just the knowledge of the GPU thing. What I'm trying to do is sample, like a couple of us are here that are at least writing drivers. And then if we can think about our users and the kind of expressions they might write, I'm trying to answer that question for you of like, what's the urgency level, right? Like, and it may be, we don't know yet, maybe the answer. If you're talking, Kevin, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. So I was having trouble with my microphone earlier. Yeah, I'd say I'm not sure. I mean, I understand the value of something like this, but yeah, I don't know how often you would need to save the result of one expression to then use it in a more complex one. Mostly because I haven't really thought about doing it until now.
So
yeah.
I think probably
So it's hard to say. I think the answer,
Yeah.
like you said, is it's hard to say. Yeah.
Right. So what I'm going to suggest, CC, is like, rather than jumping into this release, let's look at other ways to contribute, because it's uncertain, the demand for this at this point. That makes sense?
Yeah, sure.
And we'll learn as people use it. We'll be like, oh my God, look at these expressions. They're like 7 lines long. Like, we need to do something better. But if we don't reach that state, we may be okay.
Cool. I guess we can either talk now or we can like bring this offline on like either of these seems like more urgent or like more needed in this area.
That sounds good. All right, yeah, let's take it offline and you and I can talk, or we can set up something on Slack and chat and see what people. I think there's value here. We're just trying to figure out the ordering and the right things to do when. So
Sure.
Thank you. Okay. So the last one is I wanted to start looking at the board. I didn't really do like a lot of prep here, but it looks like so match expressions, probably we need to move that. So Geeta, it sounds like you're in progress with that, right? You're starting to, I'm sorry, Patrick, in progress versus ready. I can't remember.
You can move that to in progress, I would say. We have an we should have an assignee now. We know that someone is doing active work, so I think it's in progress.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Ready is where we want someone to pick it up, and we know that it is supposed to be worked on. That's for me mentally the difference between ready and backlog.
Okay, probably then resource Mixon's issue belongs in progress as well, right?
I'll assign it to myself.
Yeah.
Okay. And then cell variables, okay. Yeah, we can put it in the backlog for now. Why is prioritized alternatives? So it's already alpha.
That's why it's in the backlog, because the next step is to promote it to beta. If that is the plan for 1.34, we should move it to in progress and make a comment what it is that we plan to do in 134 for it.
I mean, it was kind of the initial plan and,
I have a PR to update the cap, and I think there's some interesting questions there around whether or not it's ready, but
okay.
I've gone through it and tried to update it, and
It's
there are
so
some
hard to do in one cycle because we just don't have any feedback at the time we start planning.
Yes, and there were some criteria that we put up that probably we need to revisit, and but
Okay.
looking at it, probably useful anyway to see what needs to happen before it is ready. So
Okay, yeah, maybe we put it, so would it make sense to put it in progress at this point, right? Because the progress would be deciding what we want to do with it. If we want to move it to beta or not. Like, it's
We
something we
could do that.
want to look at this cycle, in this kept cycle. It's not just hanging in the back.
Yes. And
Yeah.
the other thing is, for things that we plan to work on in this cycle, we need to reset or re-add the lead opted in on the enhancements.
Yeah.
Once they are removed. I see that they are currently still being set, which probably means that the release team didn't get around to removing that label yet. But I
Okay.
think they will do that at some
When they
point.
create, probably when they create the 134 milestones and whatever.
Yeah.
they need to do. After they start the cycle, okay.
admin access and partitionable devices is probably the same category. We need to decide if you want to
Yeah,
move forward or not.
okay. And probably
Okay.
device taints and tolerations, all of these, yeah.
Same there.
Sorry. You want me to do the same for this?
Yes, please.
Okay,
No,
and
Just drag it in
okay,
progress.
just
Drag it in.
this,
Yeah,
just this
yeah.
one. Okay, gotcha.
And then structured parameters for sure.
This one.
I don't think we need the comments. We'll figure
right.
that out.
You guys have to track your own comments.
Um,
Yeah.
And
Admin access too.
Yoink.
Yeah, I think the things that are.
That was the wrong one. The one bit
Oh.
That's the
further up,
wrong one, yeah.
admin
Oh,
access.
sorry. Sorry.
And then,
Yeah, resource claim status also. That's the other one that we wanted to remote to beta. To GA actually. It is
it's already
beta now.
beta, like,
Yeah.
yeah,
We
It's
could
less-
decide whether it's ready.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like, it's a little less urgent because it'll be a default on beta. And so we could like let
We
it
could just
bake. But I don't know. We'll see. I think Antonio dropped, I don't know if Lionel's here, but like, I'd like to get, like, we have some, I'd like to get some mileage under the usage as opposed to just like the APIs there.
That's
before I
the
do.
general problem that we have with the things that are currently beta. Well, with alpha we have the same problem, but we won't get the feedback while it's still alpha. So it's
Right.
this usual chicken and egg problem. There is this one pending cap from David E. It's about raising the quality bar before promoting even to beta.
I know.
And I don't know how to meet some of the expectations, in particular around feedback. And you know that it is complete, for example, without getting it into the hands of users. But in principle, I understand the motivation.
Okay, I want to look at reserved for workloads. I don't know if we're going to do anything with it yet, but I want to at least examine it. I don't
Put
see
it
how
put
we
it in
have-
progress.
Put it in progress. I just don't know that we have the capacity, but
Sure.
and we might not need, well, no, we still need it because even if we do
We should talk about it.
yeah,
I spent this looking at that area, so. we should
Right.
talk about it.
okay, and then what is this, the extend pod resources to include resources from dynamic resource. So Kevin, this one, what are we are waiting for what was this is a really, really old one, like predates even the structured parameters, right?
This has been updated. I think it's just a matter of someone pushing it through the graduation steps. What's
Okay.
the current? Yeah, it got added in. Definitely the alpha as an alpha feature. It's already in there.
Question is, do we still need it? It
We
has been
definitely need
promoted to
it.
beta. We do?
Has it gone to beta? Really?
I think it had. Oh, am I mistaken? Scroll down a little bit or check the cap channel. No, it's still alpha.
It's still alpha. Yeah.
Okay.
It was
definitely
targeted
still
for
needed.
133, but it didn't
We rely
happen.
on this. We rely on this for all of our metrics gathering for GPUs and stuff through DRA.
Okay.
Okay, well, let's
they're allocated
try and
by
make it
DRA.
beta. Let's put it
Yeah.
in progress and let's try and actually move it to beta this cycle then.
Well,
Yeah.
put it ready because I don't know who's going to work on it. Not in progress.
Okay, fair.
But yes, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
Uh,
probably the right distinction. If we know that we want to work on it, but we don't have an assignee, it should be in ready so that people looking for work can look at that column to figure out what might need help. They shouldn't pick random
Well, why don't you
tasks.
put reserved for workloads in there then too? Because I don't know who, I mean,
Yeah.
I-
It's
that-
assigned to
that's
you.
something I
If
think we need. Yeah.
if you don't want to work on it, you should unassign yourself. Or is it this? No, this is for people who commented on it, right?
That's
It's not.
no,
It's
that's
not.
the
It's
issue.
not.
That's
It's not.
people who-
Yeah. It's not the
It's not-
assignee.
Oh, really?
I don't know.
No, it's the assignee.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it is.
It's fine.
That's
You
why
can-
mine
you can
doesn't
leave
have
it
a.
in- You can leave it
That's
in
why
there.
mine
Yeah.
doesn't have a circle. Mine doesn't
Yeah.
have a circle because it doesn't have an assignee.
My
Or it
God.
does. It's got 4 of them. Okay. I take
No,
it
sorry,
back.
this is a different one. I was just
that's
surprised
a
that
different
you
one.
could
Oh, I see.
do that.
Yeah.
Wild. Okay.
It's more
Um,
common for PR reviews where you really want multiple people to do it. Issues probably should have a single owner so that they actually feel responsible
Right.
for it.
I thought the reviewer section was like separate. So
well, not for issues. That's for PRs. Or
right.
reviewers. Okay.
Wild.
So we have 4 minutes left. Can we scroll through? I think we've covered the backlog. Other than there's one I have in that Bowie created in KK, not in K enhancements. It's in the go back to the agenda. I'd be
Okay.
curious to hear people's thoughts
This
about
one.
this. So the idea here he was talking about is, hey, we have these special network interfaces that we don't want just anybody to be able to plumb into their pod. I want to say only pods in this namespace can use these resources. So this seems to me like the way my initial thoughts of implementing this is basically right. Like we have the taint rule, you could have an access rule.
Yeah.
You could do it with taints, and that's one option we talked about. But like you could have a rule, a policy, right, that controls what pods can attach to what devices. And I see you want to say something, Patrick.
Can't
Go
you
ahead.
do it with the current quota mechanism already? I mean, we do have some very basic quota where it says, well, it's not by resource slice, it's by class, I think.
That might be sufficient,
Yeah, I
though,
wouldn't-
because by class, you could characterize you could create a cell expression, and then it would say,
You could
no, that wouldn't do it because I can create a resource claim with it, yeah. My device classes are additive, not subtractive. Right?
But you have
Like,
to
I can-
specify one. You have to
You
specify
have to
one.
specify one. So I guess if the
And-
only way to, if somebody created a device class that was an empty selector, then
But-
yeah,
Then
you have to make sure
users
no
can-
device class
then you-
selects
yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. But we know that the admin controls the device classes, so we can make sure that they don't do that. And
Right.
typically they don't. All of this is about admins configuring the cluster to achieve something. Really, the question is what we have right now sufficient, or do we need something else?
Okay, yeah, well, we can do you want to comment on that issue, or you want me to, as far as that solution? Because I didn't think of that when he asked me about this, but we could have done it through quota. I thought of taints, but I didn't think of quota.
The other thing is I
can
wouldn't
debate-
do it just by namespace. If we were to embrace it in the
Agreed.
way he's worded it, we should do it with namespace annotation, similar to like we did with the admin control stuff.
Either namespace
quota,
annotation
yeah.
or express, or like a policy expression, like kind of like network policy, right?
Yeah.
Like where you can.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if we do the quota mechanism, it is by namespace.
Right.
That's how it works.
Specific namespace. Yeah.
Yes, you basically specify resource limits in a namespace, and resource limits can be number of requests using a certain device class. I think that's if I remember correctly, that's how we implemented it for DRA. And
Yes.
then you would have to have device classes mapped to certain things that you want to control.
Exactly. You couldn't leave, you couldn't let a device class select. Lord, I guess we're out of time. You couldn't let any device class select the device unless you controlled that device class with quota. So on a per namespace
Yeah.
basis, which, I mean, it's within the administrator's control. It just seems like an easy mistake you can make, but, okay. All right. Well, thank you,
Yeah, but-
everybody. Let's keep in touch on Slack and well, the cycle's getting started. So start looking over those things. Thank you all.
Right.